Welcome back. Today I'm talking to you about Masque Milano fragrances. I have a few of their fragrances. Some of them I bought myself and some of them were sent to me by MaxAroma, who are an online retailer for perfumes. They sell all sorts of perfumes. They contacted me recently saying, we've just started stocking Masque Milano and Masque perfumes and can we send you some? And I went, absolutely, because I love Masque Milano fragrances. And they very kindly gave me the freedom to choose which ones I wanted. I really was only expecting one and maybe some samples of the rest, and they sent me a couple of bottles and a travel size. So I'm very grateful for that. I actually did then go and make a purchase of a couple of decants from their website under Matt's name, shipped to a different address so that they didn't know necessarily that it was me. And they arrived really quickly, same level of communication, same speed of delivery and processing of the order. So no complaints there. The decants that I bought were the Amarige decant that I've talked about in recent videos, and also the Veronique Gabai travel sizes that I've also mentioned in recent videos. So from that perspective, customer service has been really helpful and communicative, so that's really all I want to say about that. They haven't asked me to talk about that, by the way. They really just sent me the perfumes to talk about the perfumes, but I just thought it was worthwhile mentioning given that they had sent me the perfumes. Anyway, let's talk about the perfumes because that's what you're here for, and that's obviously the most exciting part. Masque Milano launched in 2012. The founders are Riccardo Tedeschi and Alessandro Brune. I think that's how you say his name. And the fragrances to date have all been centered around, my understanding is they've been centered around the story being told in the acts of an opera. So you'll find that most of the fragrances are broken up into different acts, and I think there's 4 acts in the line, and I think they've just released the last 2, so I'm not sure if there's going to be any more opera collection fragrances coming out from them. They do also have a few other fragrances in a different line, but I haven't tried any of those. One day maybe I'll get the chance to try those as well. I have used different perfumers for different perfumes, so each of the perfumes I'm talking about today has a different perfumer behind it, and I think that's really all I need to say. They are a fantastic house. I find their fragrances to be quite unique. Their fragrances also perform really well in my experience. They last a long time, and I don't know, they just all have something different about them. I haven't smelled anything from the line that I think smells a lot like something else, but then I haven't smelled everything, so don't take my word for it. I'll start with the one that I already owned and love, and that is Kintsugi. The perfumer behind Kintsugi is Vanina Maraccioli. I'm hoping I'm saying her name correctly. She has been involved in quite a few fragrances for Jevois, but she's probably more notably known for her work with the House of Jeroboam. She's had a hand in quite a number of their fragrances. This is a really beautiful golden floral scent. It's very interesting. To me, it smells very hay-like. Hay or dried grass, but not grass, not galbanum grass, but sort of dried vegetation combined with florals and a bit of incense. The florals are really, the main floral in the top apparently is magnolia. I've never actually smelled magnolia, so I don't know what that smells like. I can't really pick out a specific floral note in here. It does smell, as I said, very golden, very yellow. I wouldn't necessarily say solar, but it does have this sort of golden hue to it. It opens quite dry and scratchy on me, and I think there's a lot of patchouli in here, but it's very light. The patchouli isn't dark and it's not chocolatey, and then it sort of becomes a little bit sweet, but it's not immediately apparent. It kind of builds a little bit. It really balances beautifully the dryness of those golden grassy tones. and the scratchiness of the patchouli perhaps. But then as it dries down, you also get this sort of hint of a smoky element coming through, and it's very subtle, and again, it's not enough to change the light structure of this fragrance. I find this fragrance to be very airy and very diffusive, and not too heavy on the skin. And I really, it's just so different. It doesn't smell like anything else I've ever smelled. I love this fragrance. Some people it doesn't work for. Some people find some of the elements in here to maybe turn a bit sour on their skin, and they feel like it almost becomes urinous. That doesn't happen to me. So I strongly recommend you sample first, always sample first. Personally, I love how this smells in every stage of the development. And that's the other thing about this fragrance, is that it does change quite a bit throughout the wear. You know, it starts off kind of dry and scratchy, then it gets a little bit more sweet and almost fruity, floral, and then you get this incense and the more woody tones coming out in the base, and it's fantastic. But again, like I say, it always has this golden hue to it, and I don't know how they've done that, but it's incredible. So I would say, if we're using my old rating system, I would say that for Kintsugi, I would give it a 5 out of 5 for uniqueness. I'd give it a 4.5 out of 5 for my pure enjoyment of the fragrance. I knock half a star off because just because it's not something that I can wear any day. I kind of do have to be in the mood for it a bit. For performance, I would probably give it, well, personally, I would give it a 5 out of 5, but being aware that other people prefer their fragrances to be a bit more beastly than perhaps I do, I'll give it a 4 out of 5. I'll say that it lasts a decent amount of time on my skin. I think I get it at sort of 8 to 10 hours on my skin easily. I feel like I can always smell it throughout the day when I'm wearing it, so I get a nice little scent bubble happening around me. But it probably, for most people, they would probably think that it would start with moderate projection and then sort of drop to a low projection. So next up is Lost Alice. I have also talked about Lost Alice on the channel, I think maybe on the live stream that I did a few weeks ago, and I've talked about it quite a bit on Instagram as well. So this is one of the ones that MaxAroma sent me. I wasn't sure I was going to love this one because a lot of people had described it as smelling like carrot cake and being very gourmand, and I thought it's probably not going to be for me, but I was really curious about it. Turns out I absolutely love this fragrance. I wore this yesterday, during the day, and in the evening because I just didn't want to stop wearing it. So I re-spritzed it after I had a shower to go out in the evening, and it was wonderful. I really enjoyed it. So Lost Alice opens with quite a bit of iris, or orris actually, and I'm a huge iris fan, so I was pleasantly surprised because there is another one here that I'm about to talk about shortly that is touted as being the iris fragrance, and yet I find the opening of this to be a beautiful blast of iris, and it's not too waxy, it's just a hint of powderiness. It's not too dense either. It's beautiful. There is a sweetness to this, and I understand why people refer to carrot cake, but I don't necessarily find this to be cakey. I find this to be more like, there is a carrot note in here, and I find it to be more like grated carrot that's steamed with sugar and maybe a bit of spice. I think there is it a Middle Eastern dish or an Indian dish dessert where they grate the carrot and they put a heap of sweet stuff in it, and it smells amazing, but it really just smells like sweet carrot, or carrot with extra sweetness added to it, because carrots already smell quite sweet when they're stewed anyway. It doesn't smell necessarily like cake to me, but I understand why people have sort of likened it to carrot cake. There is also kind of a bit of a milkiness to it, or a creaminess to it. So again, I get the carrot cake reference with that cream cheese frosting, but for me, it's sort of more like, again, that stewed carrot dessert and maybe a cup of tea, like chai tea or something that you're having alongside it. As it dries down, you get more of the sandalwood coming forward, but it always keeps that sweetness. And I don't know, it's quite a linear fragrance. I don't feel like it changes that much throughout the course of the wear, but it is super addictive, really, really pretty. And again, it's just not super heavy, which I really love and appreciate in a gourmand leaning fragrance, that it's just not too much, and because otherwise I wouldn't want to wear it. But this one always stays fairly light and diffusive. I wouldn't say it's a light wearing fragrance. I think there is definitely some depth to it and there is definitely some body to it. But again, it doesn't weigh you down. And when I found out who the perfumer was, I went, oh, well, that explains why I do love it. The perfumer behind this one is Mackenzie Riley. And you will recall, you may know that she has also done some fragrances for Amouage. One of the most notable ones for me was Meander. Can definitely, now that I know, I'm sort of going, okay, yeah, I recognize some familiar use of the notes in here, but totally different fragrances, not the same at all. Yeah, so that is Lost Alice. My rating for Lost Alice, I would say enjoyment, again, 5 out of 5. Performance, I would say it's probably a little bit less than, it's probably a little bit lower than Kintsugi. I think this one does die down a little bit more than the Kintsugi one does. So I'll give it a 3.5 out of 5. It still lasts a fairly long time, but it sort of sits much closer to the skin after a couple of hours. And then what's the last rating? Oh, uniqueness of scent. Then yes, I think it's, again, I think it's very unique, and I think it's a beautiful, if you're scared of gourmands and you're scared of cakey scents being too cakey, this is a really good one to check out, because it doesn't make you smell like food, even though it reminds you of food, if that makes any sense. So that is Lost Alice. Next up, we have Latessa. This is the one that everyone talked about as being the iris fragrance to have from Masque Milano. This was touted as being one of the best iris fragrances around. It uses orris in both the top and the mid. And the perfumer behind this one is Luca Maffei. And if you look at his listing of work that he's done and fragrances that he has made, I don't know if I recognize necessarily many of the fragrances, but what I did notice was that he clearly loves using iris or orris in his fragrances, because he seems to have a lot of very orris dominant fragrances that he's made. So if anyone was going to make an iris fragrance for Masque Milano, I guess I know why it was him. So this is not what I was expecting. Okay, I thought this was going to be an instant love for me, and I do actually really enjoy it, but it's just not what I was expecting, and I'll explain why. So this opens quite bright when you first spray it. You definitely get the iris straight up, but the iris is kind of, and I guess they do say that they use orris root in here, which they're always using orris root anyway, but that aside. But it does actually smell quite earthy. It doesn't smell like dirt, it doesn't smell like soil, but it has an earthy quality around it. And even though the opening is bright, it's not citrusy, it's not fruity, but there is kind of a bit of a sparkle in there, and I don't know what it's from, but apparently it's a champagne note, whatever they've used to make a champagne note. I don't know if it's aldehydes, but there is something a little zingy in there. So it's almost like you can feel the fizz of the bubbles on your tongue. So I really like the opening, but it is not what I expected. I expected maybe something a bit more powdery, maybe something with a bit more sweetness in it. This isn't particularly a sweet fragrance. So as it dries, the iris really starts to develop more of an earthy tone. So iris has a few ways that it can come off. It can come off powdery, it can come off a little bit leathery, it can come off earthy, and it also can come across as being a bit floral as well, which is why I think a lot of people often think that it's an iris flower, but it's not. They actually use the rhizome or the root of the plant to get the scent. I mean, there is bergamot and neroli in the opening. I feel like I do get just a hint of that neroli. If you're afraid of neroli or you don't like neroli, I wouldn't be put off by the fact that this has neroli in it, because it's actually quite subtle. I think it helps to give it a little bit of body, maybe a slight hint of greenness, a little bit of sharpness, where the orris is, you know, the opposite of that. It's not sharp. And so while I'm on the point of it having this sort of sharp element, it is interesting, because usually when a fragrance opens bright, it opens with sharpness and then it mellows down. With this one, I find I get a bit of sharpness building up towards the mid. At first, I wasn't sure if I liked it. And in some ways, I kept thinking it was coming off as feeling a little bit plasticky. And when I really think about it, I feel like it's coming from that, maybe partly from the neroli, and because I think it has a green tinge to it, and maybe even a slightly soapy tinge to it, but it's very subtle. It's definitely quite a cool fragrance. I wouldn't describe it as cold. So when I think of cold iris fragrances, I think of things like Dior Amore. They're just a little bit more standoffish. I don't feel like this has that, but it does have a bit of an elegance about it that conjures up an image of somebody in a very sharp suit, you know, somebody who's very polished and, you know, no wrinkles or anything like that. That's kind of the vibe I'm getting. And I'm wondering if that's just sort of the more woody elements of the orris and the other notes coming forward. And then as it dries down later on, I feel like it develops more of almost a humid mossiness. You know, I wouldn't say it's damp, but there's kind of like you can feel a little hint of moisture in the air. And that to me blends really, really nicely with how it dries down, because the dry down to me is sort of more of a leathery, woody tone. It's not a blast of leather, it's not dark leather by any means, but I think the more leathery aspect of the orris is coming through in the dry down, and that just seems to match beautifully with this sort of humid mossiness that it gets. It's a really interesting fragrance, and like I said, it's not what I expected. I kind of already had an image in my mind of what it was going to smell like, and at first I was sort of disappointed that this didn't match this image that I had in my mind, but now I really enjoy this fragrance because it's not what I thought it was going to be. And quite frankly, what I thought it was going to be is kind of boring, because I've already got loads of fragrances that sort of smell like that. So to me, this is super, super interesting, really unique again, and how they managed to make an orris dominant fragrance smell so unique, I don't know, but it's wonderful. I really, really love it. I don't think, though, it will be for everybody. It is a very different kind of take on orris, and I just don't think everyone will like it. I feel like throughout the course of the wear, you get all elements of orris. You get, except for the powderiness, I don't find this fragrance to be particularly powdery or waxy for that matter. But there is a creaminess to it. It's not very sweet. You get some floral aspects in the mid, and then you get the sort of more leathery and woody aspects in the dry down. It is a stunning iris showcase, and it's worth getting a sample just to experience it and just to smell it if you like orris-based fragrances. This is not one that I could wear every day. Again, I kind of have to be in the mood for it. But when it works, it is perfect. And on a day like today, it's cold. I feel like we're back in winter today. It's raining, it's cold. I'm wearing winter clothes, and it's wonderful. It's wonderful for a day like this. It's kind of gloomy. And this isn't a gloomy fragrance, but I wouldn't necessarily say it's super bright either. It's got a sedateness about it, but it's not sad, and it's not standoffish either. So rating, I think I would give this uniqueness, again, I think I'd probably give it a 5. Performance, I think it performs okay. I haven't worn it a huge amount on my skin, but I probably get about 5 hours solidly out of it that I can smell, but it does sit a lot closer to the skin. It's not a huge projecting fragrance. So maybe for that reason, I'll give it a 3 out of 5, maybe a 3.5, because it does, to me, it lasts a decent amount of time. And at the moment, I've just sprayed, one spray on my hand, and I'm getting a beautiful scent bubble around me. And then for overall enjoyment, I would give it a 4 out of 5. All right, so next up is one that I have been wanting to try for years, and I could just never seem to get it. Or, and if anyone sent me samples of Masque Milano, no one ever sent me a sample of this, and this was always the one that I wanted to try. This is Tango. If you've heard of Masque Milano, no doubt you have heard about this fragrance. It has been talked about a lot on social media. It's gotten a lot of airtime. The perfumer behind this is Cecile Zarokian, another fantastic perfumer. Cecile is probably most recently, notable for her work on material for the House of Amouage, but she's done a truckload of perfumes, and I love her work. I'm also particularly in love with the perfume she did for Laboratorio Olfativo, which is neurotic. Great fragrance. Great fragrance. Anyway, we're not talking about other houses. We're talking about Tango by Masque Milano. This is another one that doesn't smell anything like how I expected it to smell, even having heard other people talk about it. And the reason, it is hard to describe, but it's definitely a challenge for me, but a challenge I'm willing to accept because I really appreciate it. Okay, so this smells like a hot, sweaty night. It smells like a hot, sweaty night in a club. Can be an open air club, maybe in a hot location. It smells of hot skin, of sticky liqueurs and cocktails, and maybe a little bit of cigar wafting through it. And I know partly the name is conjuring up this image, but it really is what it smells like to me. It smells a little bit messy, not composition wise, but I mean, like your hair, you've been dancing, your skin is sweaty, your perfume's sort of is mingling with your sweat, and you're disheveled because you've been dancing hard, That is what this fragrance makes me think of. It's a carnal amber. You've been sexy dancing with somebody on the dance floor, and that somebody might not be somebody that you've met previous to this night. I feel like I get something that's almost cherry-like in here as well. I wouldn't say I don't even know if it is cherry. I guess, and that's where I'm sort of thinking the liqueur bent to it comes in, because I feel like maybe it's something that's got a bit of cherry liqueur in it or something like that. There's definitely a hint of some kind of dark fruit like that in it. And it actually stays around for the whole fragrance. I think there's a bunch of benzoin in here. There is a sweetness, almost bordering on sickly, and it is quite a spicy sweetness. It's kind of also a little bit leathery as well, and it's got a darkness to it, this fragrance. It's definitely a nighttime fragrance. There apparently is a cumin note in here, so I think that's what's giving it the body, hot body kind of vibe. And look, I'm not unhappy with this. It's definitely not something that I can wear all the time, and I think I am definitely going to have to leave it for the cooler months, although I'm tempted to try it in the warmer months, maybe in the evening, because it is such a sexy fragrance, and it does really make you think of sexy times, or just, again, being very provocative with somebody in a public space. So it's not super, super sexy in the sense of like total bedroom vibes, but it is definitely, it's seductive, it's provocative, and it's intense. It's really intense. Yeah, sometimes it can be a bit too much. I've tried to wear it a couple of times, but literally when I've been wearing it, I've put one spritz on my hand. I haven't been brave enough to like do a full wear of it yet, but it is really cool. It's a very cool fragrance, and I just think I need to pluck up some courage to wear it. Maybe I will take a little sample of this with me to Thailand. It might be a really interesting one to test out in the evening if we go to the beach or somewhere. If we go out to a bar or something, it might be an interesting one to try. But in a tiny amount, because it's super, super potent, very strong, and I don't want to choke people out. But yeah, I'm curious to see what the reactions would be if I were to wear this in Thailand. All right, so I'm rambling now. I don't feel like I've done this total justice. Bear in mind, these are not full reviews. I've tried wearing them a few times. I've had them for a couple of months now, but I still feel like I'm very much in the first impressions phase of getting to know these fragrances, because they're hard to know. I mean, they're super complex fragrances, I think, and there's lots to them, and I get different things at different times, so just bear that in mind, I think. Okay, so ratings. So uniqueness, again, I can't not give it a 5 out of 5. I'm an easy marker. Am I an easy marker? I don't think so. But I do really appreciate the fact that this, it just doesn't smell like it's not your typical amber fragrance, put it that way. So yeah, 5 out of 5 for this. Performance, I think this one is a beast. I've worn it twice, and both times I just spritzed a little bit on the back of my hand, and it was a light spritz too. It wasn't even a full spritz. So, and it lasted forever. In fact, last night I spritzed a bit on the back of my hand because I was, trying to get my thoughts together for this video and remind myself what it smelled like. And this morning I woke up and it was still on my hand, and it was like the tiniest little spritz, and it smelled amazing this morning, actually, I have to say. So yeah, 5 out of 5 for performance on this one. I think it projects, and it's a beast, and it lasts a long time. And then for my overall enjoyment of it, I think I will give it a 3.5 out of 5, because I feel like it's above average for me, but it is challenging, and it's not something that I would be able to wear any old time. So yeah, I'll give it a 3.5 out of 5. That may change the more I try it though, just saying. All right, so we have one more, and this one I have the paper strip for, because this is one that I am too chicken to put on my skin. Matt's put it on his skin, he liked it. This is Times Square. The perfumer behind this is Bruno Jovanovic, and it is interesting. Bruno has also done fragrances for Amouage. He very notably was the nose behind Rose Incense, but he's also done a few for Frederic Malle. Dries Van Noten is one that comes to mind, and he also was the nose behind Mon Vetiver for Essential Parfums, which is another fragrance I very much enjoy. Anyway, so this fragrance, as the name would suggest, is inspired by the city of New York. So if you've ever been to New York, well, I mean, it's like any city. There's grungy parts, it can be dirty, it can be clean, there's well-to-do parts and not so well-to-do parts. But I think the thing with New York City is that it's so densely populated that all of these things are in very close proximity to each other. New York City, I feel like it very much is just a big mishmash, and it's all in together, and that's what makes New York, New York. That's what makes it so interesting, because it's so dense and everything's just jumbled in together. So that is kind of what this fragrance is. This is really nice things jumbled in with some not so nice things, and it is definitely the most challenging of the ones that I have, and I'm glad they only sent me the travel size of this one, because I was curious to try it. I knew that it was probably going to be challenging for me. I'm not a huge fan of it at this moment, but I do feel like this is the type of fragrance that if I keep trying it, I keep testing it, I have a feeling it's one of those ones that I maybe one day am going to go, oh, suddenly I love it. And the reason I think that is because there is something about this fragrance, as much as it is off-putting to me, there is something super, super addictive about it, and I just want to keep smelling it. I want to keep coming back to it, and then I smell it and I go, oh, yeah, maybe not, and then I go back again. So there is definitely elements of this fragrance that I clearly am very drawn to, but at the same time, some of the challenging bits of it are just way too challenging for me. So I think one of the things I really love in this fragrance is the osmanthus. There is an osmanthus note that's very lush and sweet and fleshy. And there's also some woods in here, and the woods are, from what I can gather, fairly clean. They're solid. They've got, you know, a bit of depth, but they're not too dark and they're not too sharp. They're not too dry. They're sort of just really solid, steadfast, woody notes. And I wouldn't say this fragrance goes particularly woody in the dry down or otherwise, but I do find that I get the woodiness, but the woodiness sort of just provides a bit of a base, a bit of structure to the mishmash of other stuff that's on top of it. The one thing I do really get, like, that smacks me in the face as soon as I smell this, is you get the sweetness of the, you know, maybe some of that osmanthus, and there's probably other notes in there as well, like fruity type stuff. It's sort of a fruity floral, but it also smells a little bit Uranus. It smells like you're walking past a street corner where, you know, somebody's urinated on it a few hours earlier, and you're getting wafts of that. You're getting wafts of somebody's, you know, fruity floral perfume as they're walking past you. And maybe I'm also getting like the smell of furniture, so maybe that's sort of the woodiness coming through. It's really hard to get my head around this one. There's just so much going on in it, but there's definitely this Uranus aspect to it. There's also this aspect of rotting rubbish. You know that there's a grocer that I go to here where they deal primarily with fresh produce. They don't deal that much with, you know, packaged goods, but they get a lot of high volume fresh produce coming in, and it's usually it's fairly cheap. It's not, you know, it's not stuff that's going to last you days and days and days. You go there, you buy the stuff, and then you use it pretty much straight away. But whenever I walk past, there's a section where they have these big bins, right? And that's where they must dispose of the stuff that they can't sell. And there's all this liquid kind of running through the car park, and it stinks. Like it's rotting. It's basically rotting fruits and vegetables, but it has a sweetness to it, that rotting sweetness. And that's kind of, there's a little bit of that in here to me, which sounds really gross, and it is a bit gross. It's challenging. Like I say, I can't, this is not one that I actually have been brave enough to put on my hand yet, on my skin, because I don't know how long it's going to last. I have a feeling it'll probably last too long for me to want to wear it. But at the same time, there's this beautiful floral notes in here that I really, really like. There's also a lot of violet in here. Sweet violet. It's not super powdery. In fact, I don't really find this fragrance to be powdery at all, at least not on the paper. So you've got this sweet violet and fleshy, juicy osmanthus, and these woods, and maybe some resin. It's hard to describe, but it's very hard to wear as well. Well, I think it would be, because I've been too scared to put it on my skin. Matt sprayed it on his skin, and he said that he liked it. But then a little while later, he was going, oh yeah, I can see what you mean about how it's a little bit different. And it is. So, I mean, I can't really go on much more about it. It's very different. It's probably a bit too challenging for me. I had a feeling that it would be, but I was curious to try it. Approach with caution. All right, so my ratings. what am I going to give this one? Uniqueness. Yep, 5 out of 5. They've blown it out of the park today. All the Masque Milano ones today have gotten a 5 out of 5 for uniqueness. Longevity, I can't really speak to because I haven't worn it on skin. So it's lasted very well on the paper. I haven't had to re-spritz this. I spritzed this sort of yesterday, late evening, I guess, or late afternoon, I should say. And it's very prominent. I will say that the smell hasn't changed that much throughout that time. So I wonder if this maybe wears quite linear, but on skin it may play differently. And for enjoyment, I don't know, it's hard to rate this one because on the one hand, I'm kind of addicted to it. I kind of want to keep smelling it. But at the same time, I'm too scared to wear it. So maybe I give it a 2.5 out of 5 for my personal enjoyment of the smell of this fragrance. I do appreciate the artistry behind this, however, which I know is what people think that people say when like they're wanting to talk something up, but they really, really hate it. I don't really, really hate it, but I just, it is a piece of art, this fragrance, but at the same time, it's not one that I find to be very wearable and approachable. Okay, so they are my thoughts on the Masque Milano fragrances that I was sent, and thank you again to MaxAroma. This video is not sponsored, but they obviously have sent me some stuff. I was under no obligation to do a video necessarily. They did ask me if I could do an Instagram post, which I did do, but I thought it was worthwhile talking a little bit more about these fragrances. I probably will put a little blurb up on the website, on the blog, about these as well. I'm trying to be a bit more consistent with putting stuff on the blog. Oh yeah, my friend Daniel actually gave me, I think, samples of the 2 new ones, Slater Fern and is it White Whale? Damn, I actually could have included those in this video. Oh well, that'll be what goes onto the blog then. So if you want to get my thoughts on those 2, keep an eye out on the blog and I'll upload my thoughts there. Anyway, thank you so much for joining me. Please give this a thumbs up if you enjoyed this, and I hope you did because I had so much fun discovering these fragrances and I look forward to discovering more from Masque Milano. Okay, great. Well, I'm gonna go because I need some coffee and I'll see you in the next one. Bye.